Summary of Part 2, Fundamentals of Using the HP 110 and HP Portable Plus computers. A. An understanding of the fundamentals presented in this section is necessary for making full use of your HP Portable. B. RAM and ROM. 1. RAM, random access memory, and ROM, read-only memory, are silicon chips that store information in the form of files in the HP Portables. The contents of files stored in RAM may change over time. The contents of files stored in ROM stay the same. 2. Bytes are the units of memory space. A byte contains approximately one alphabetic character. 1,000 bytes is 1K, 1 kilobyte. 1,000,000 bytes is 1 megabyte. On the HP 110 and Portable Plus, software and the data files created by the software are stored in ROM, electronic B drive, or RAM, electronic A drive. Software applications such as Memo Maker and Lotus 123 are most often stored in ROM, although some application software can be stored in RAM. 4. HP Portable users may choose how to divide up their RAM space between temporary workspace memory, which is required to run software, and permanent electronic disk, e-disk space, used for storage. To do so, use F6 System Config from the main PAM menu. 5. The HP 110 comes with 272K of RAM. DOS, Lotus 123, Memo Maker, and Terminal are built into 384K of ROM. 6. The Portable Plus comes with 128K or 512K of RAM and with DOS and ROM. The two empty compartments at the bottom of the Portable Plus can be filled with a combination of RAM or ROM drawers. A RAM drawer may contain 128K, 384K, or 1 megabyte of memory. A ROM drawer contains 12 empty sockets into which you can put software applications on ROM, such as Lotus 123, Memo Maker, or Webster's Spelling Checker. C. Special keys. 1. The contrast key. Hold the contrast key down for 15 seconds to shut off the system. Briefly hold down the contrast key or shift contrast key to adjust the contrast. 2. Extend character keys. Hold down the extend character keys with other portable keys to produce non-English characters, additional cursor movement keys, and a numeric keypad on the Portable Plus. See the writing on the front side of keys for extend character functions. 3. The function keys. The 8 labels at the bottom of the screen correspond to 8 function keys. In some programs, the menu key is F9, the user system is F10. D. Maximize screen readability by 1. Keeping the light source above or behind you. 2. Adjusting the tilt of the screen. 3. Holding down the contrast or shift contrast key. E. Communicating to the outside world, the back of the computer. 1. If possible, always keep the battery recharger plugged into the left rear of the portable. 2. The 2 receptacles right next to the recharger receptacle are for thin black HPIL cords, which allow the portable to connect to a printer, disk drive, and even an IBM PC or IBM PC compatible. 3. Pressing the button inside the battery compartment resets the portable to all default settings and erases the files in the RAM disk. 4. The 9-pin serial port can be used to communicate with a printer, modem, plotter, mouse, or any other serial device. Configure the device using PAM's system config and datacom config. 5. Any standard phone cord fits into the jack in back of the HP Portable. The HP Portable can send or receive data through the phone lines using communications software. F. The home screen. PAM, Personal Applications Manager. 1. The PAM screen itself gives much useful information, including battery charge, bytes free on RAM disk, time and date. 2. To start an application program from PAM, simply move the cursor to the program's name and press return. 3. By pressing PAM's function keys, you can copy, rename, and delete files, set time and date, and configure your portable system. G. Turn your HP Portable on by pressing any key. Turn it off by pressing the F8 key from PAM. Part 3. ROM-based software applications built into the HP 110 and Portable Plus. In this section, we're going to actually look at some of the built-in software in more detail. We're going to look at first MS-DOS, we're going to look at Memo Maker, Lotus, some communication software, and Time Manager. And we're doing this not to make you experts at any of these programs, but to give you enough information, a starting point, so that you'll be able to learn these programs easily on your own. This first section that we're going to look at in applications is DOS commands. Now, DOS really isn't an application, and you may not ever really need to use it, but you should know about it. Let's look at some of the reasons why you might need to know about DOS. More control and flexibility over file and disk management than with PAM. If you know the DOS command, DOS is quicker than PAM. DOS has more functionality than PAM. For example, disk copy, check disk, debug, headline, and other commands. If you use other non-HP IBM compatible computers, you will have to learn DOS. So DOS is useful, at least to know about. It's what PAM was trying to hide you from. To first understand DOS, probably a good idea is to understand what a file is. DOS, by the way, stands for Disk Operating System. And its main concern, actually, is manipulating files. So the question is, how do we represent a file? And it turns out that we represent a file there's 4 different aspects to the actual file name. First, there's an 8-letter word that you can mix numbers and letters. So you could call a file, say, letter or chap 1 or any number of other, budget, and so on. Following those 8 characters are a period and then 3 more characters. So optionally, after you say chap 1, you could say period txt for text. Or you would say budget period WKS. In fact, certain applications like Lotus require that the last 3 letters are a specifically defined 3 letters. In the case of Lotus 1A, all Lotus files that you create in Lotus end up having the extension WKS. Another part of that file name that you may choose to include, or you may be required to include, depending on where you are in a particular program, is actually specifying what disk that you're talking about. So most of the most of the files that you're working with on the RAM disk that you'll be working on, you'll be storing in the RAM disk, which is the A drive. So you might, for example, call a file a:chap1 period text, txt. Finally, there's something that we won't go into in this tape, but you can divide up your directory into subdirectories. And you may be required then to give the path, the name of the subdirectory. So a file name may actually be a:\letters \George period txt. Let's look at some examples of legal file names. We could call a file memo, or budget period WKS, or chap1.txt, as I mentioned before. Or maybe we'll call our address book that we created in Lotus a:\address period WKS. Or maybe we stored some customer records on an external C disk that we decided to embed the date inside the name. And we could go C:\cus10x88. Or we may have a subdirectory, like I mentioned previously, where we say a:\letters \George period let. The important thing to remember here is that when you create a file in an application, like a letter in Memo Maker, you want to give it a name. And that name needs to be a legal DOS name, 8 characters or less. Now let's look at DOS commands. Let's look at a few examples of the most useful ones that you should know about. In the HP Portable Plus, most of the DOS commands that are available are actually built into the unit. On the HP 110, only some of the DOS commands can be found actually built into the system, into the 110 in ROM. The other ones can be found in the external disk, the extra utilities disk. So you can see on the Portable Plus, the cursor is already pointing to DOS commands. In the HP 110, we'd have to move the cursor over several boxes, but it's just as easy. And then now, to start it, we press return and we're in DOS. Now, a very simple command that any DOS user will know is the dir command, where we press return and we get a directory listing. If we had chosen, we could have used PAM File Manager, and remember from the last section, the listing of the files just appeared in boxes. Now, the first command I want to talk to you about is the disk copy command. And although I'm not going to illustrate it right here, I'm going to tell you what it is. The disk copy command allows you to copy a disk, an external disk, from a disk drive, one disk drive to another disk drive, or in the case of most portable users who only have one disk, just one disk to itself. In other words, suppose you have a disk, an external disk, a floppy disk, and you want to copy the contents of that disk to another disk. You would just simply give the command, I'll type it out, disk copy C:, in other words, copy my files from C to C, and then you'd press return. And it tells you to insert the formatted target disk, or the original disk, in drive C, and then strike any key when ready. What should happen when I strike a key is that I'll get an error message because I don't have an external disk hooked up to this. In fact, I got a very common DOS error where it says, not ready, reading drive C, abort, retry, ignore. And in this case, I'm just going to type abort. But if the disk drive was hooked up, we would be able to keep putting this one disk in, the original disk, and then the target disk and the source disk and the target disk back and forth until we actually made the complete copy. Now, I'd like to talk about another command that I probably use more than any other DOS command that's not included in PAM, and that's check disk. And so I'm going to type it in, CHKDSK, and then press return. And what we'll have is an important listing that gives us all sorts of interesting information. We find that there are 767,000 bytes of total disk space, and that 11 files occupy 45,000 of those, and that leaves us 721,000 bytes of available of eDisk. It also tells us, now this is what's important that many users don't realize, it also tells us how much internal memory we have configured. Remember the main memory in eDisk. This tells us, main memory or eDisk, that there's 143,000 bytes of main memory or internal memory for temporary storage. And of that, some of it's being used up by the DOS, because we're in this program DOS. And so we actually have 114,000 bytes free, 114,000 bytes free if we were to do something else from DOS. The other most important program that is built into the Portable Plus and is available from us for 110 users for just the cost of us copying the disk is a program called PAC. As I say, this program is built into the Plus, and it really should have been built into the 110. If I type PAC, not much is going to happen, actually. We're just going to press return, and it looks like nothing happened. But something actually very significantly did happen. What happened is the files, which can get spread out all over the electronic disk, are getting packed together into one spot. Now, this is important because if we can get stuck otherwise. And what I mean by stuck is that if suppose you have a 512K of RAM memory, and you've configured 128K as internal memory and 384K as electronic disk. Now suppose you're using Lotus and you're generating a larger and larger budget or spreadsheet. And there comes a point where you find that you need more internal memory. In other words, you need more temporary space just to store the file, the temporary file. So you'll want to go into PAM's system config and change that eDisk, that memory, main memory eDisk ratio. And even though you should be able to, because files are not occupying that RAM eDisk space, the system won't let you. And the reason why is because the files need to be packed. So again, to use the command, just type PACK, oops, packs, that too, but pack. And although nothing appears to happen, when you get back into system configuration, you'll be able to change the ratio between main memory and eDisk. One little bit of warning, if you have an earlier version of the Portable Plus, one with only 128K base, then there is a problem with the PAC program that if you have subdirectories, you shouldn't use it. And again, we'll supply, it's a very small file. Let's do it. In fact, let's do a dir to show the size of files. Here we don't have PAC is found in a ROM. In fact, let's see if we can find it here. I think it's D. This is a little bit of, let's see if we can find the PAC program. Yeah, there it is. So the PAC program has only 792 bytes. It's a very, very small file. And we have that, a good version. So if you have an old Plus and you use subdirectories, just give us a call and we'll send you a disk containing PAC for the cost of disk duplication. A final command from DOS that I should mention that's useful is the print command. You could type print and a file name, and you would actually, if it was a very simple, what we call ASCII file, be able to print that to your ThinkJet or DeskJet or whatever printer you have connected to it. The one advantage of using this print program rather than printing from your application is that you can print 4 or 5 files at once. You can just go print chap 1, print chap 2, print chap 3, just keep issuing commands, and then go back and do something else. And so you can keep working while it's printing. The other useful concept, and it's beyond the scope of this tape, but it's something you should know about, is something called batch files. You can put 3 or 4 of these DOS commands in a file, save that file, and then execute that file, by naming the file name period BAT. And then you would just type file name period BAT, and all those DOS commands that were in the batch file would get executed. Now, if you want to learn more about DOS, then what you should do is you could look at your Portable Plus or your HP 110 reference manual, but it's not exactly light reading. What I would suggest is go to a bookstore, any bookstore now, and you'll find the computer section. And in that computer section, you'll find a half a dozen books devoted to DOS. Just thumb through it and see what seems to be most readable. It doesn't really matter that much. I've always liked the Peter Norton books, but any DOS book will do the trick. And you'll learn more. And as you become more sophisticated, it'll be good to learn DOS. Word processing on the portables with Memo Maker. Letters, memos, reports. Hewlett-Packard created a word processor called Memo Maker. And their thinking when they created this word processor, it was to create one that was as simple to use as possible. They realized that everybody needs a word processor, and very few people really want to take the time to learn a sophisticated one. And most people use word processors, especially in a portable environment, to write letters or memos or short reports. And they don't need the full-featured word processing programs that are available in the marketplace. And so let's take a look at Memo Maker. Now we're back to the home screen. One thing that I'd like to mention, that I returned to this PAM home screen from DOS by just typing the word exit, E-X-I-T, and pressed return. And then I returned to PAM. Now let's move to Memo Maker. So once again, this is old hat to us all. We'll just move the cursor to Memo Maker. We press return, and we're in it. Now, to use Memo Maker, all you have to do is start typing. So I'm going to start typing. This is I guess you can read it. I pressed a couple wrong keys, so I'll just backspace and retype over it. So I could create a whole document by just simply typing. One of the things we mentioned earlier, it was that we could actually insert information within a document. So I'm going to move my cursor key, my left arrow key, back here. I'm going to hold down the extend character and press the plus character key, that F7 plus key, and you'll remember at the bottom of the screen an I will appear to tell us that we're in insert mode. And now that I appeared. And then we will add our word HP space. So we've shown that you could type over, or in other words, replace characters that exist on the screen or insert them. Now what we'll do is actually take a look at some of the other functionality of Memo Maker. And to do this, we'll again remind ourselves the relationship between the labels on the bottom of the screen and the function keys. For example, F6 is center line. So all I have to do is press F6 and the line becomes centered. F7 is help. So if I press F7, it'll tell us actually what each of the keys mean. To get out of help, I press F7 again. To get a memo, which we'll get, we'll just press F5. Now, when I got a memo, it asked me a very good question. It asked me, do I want to, see F5 and F6 are actually questions. Do I want to save my existing memo, or do I want to throw it away? Imagine if I had spent maybe an hour or two writing this memo that I created with HP Memo Maker, and then I just brought up another file without saving it, then I would have lost all that work. Because remember, until we save the file, what's happening is the memo that we're working on is only in temporary space rather than permanent eDisk space. So in fact, this really, well, let's just save it. Let's say yes, save. And so we'll press yes, save. And actually, it asks me there, enter the file name and press return. So let's save this as temp. It's a temporary file, just to show you. And so I'll press return. And then the screen clears because remember, I had wanted to save a file. I wanted to get a file. So now we'll press F5, get a file. And we'll type keypad. Remember, we changed the name touch to keypad. We changed the file that we had named touch. Press return, and keypad loads. Now let's look at the actually, in a way, more important keys here on the left. The file keys, block keys, format keys, and print keys. Remember back in the fundamental section, we talked about the concept of menu. And in fact, we are going into deeper menus. As suggested by the title and the plural of keys, if we press any of these 4 keys, we're going in to find some more keys. So for example, let's press file keys. We press file keys and a whole number of other choices up here. We can get memo, which is what we just did. So there's actually 2 ways of getting a memo. We could save a memo. So I could resave this. I could get what's called a format file. And we'll see about that in a minute. A format file is simply a file that contains your tabbing and your margins. And so you may have different formats for different types of documents, so you can get or save that particular formatting information. We have F5 File Manager. Now remember File Manager from PAM? Well, it turns out on the Portable Plus, but not the HP 110, you can actually manage your files while you're in the middle of Memo Maker. So let's just press File Manager to remind us, and we'll go yet another layer deeper. And we see the same choices of printing a file or deleting a file, making or choosing a directory, formatting a disk, copying a file, rename a file, and exit that we illustrated when we talked about PAM. We don't really want to do any of this, so we're going to press F8 and get out of that, and we'll find that we're back in file keys. Now notice, let's look at some information on the screen. We see on the very top that we're in Memo Maker, that we're actually in the File Keys submenu, that the memo we're editing on the right is keypad. Right below that it tells us we're in directory A. In other words, we're working on our eDisk. We're on line 6, and we're in column 1, and the length of the file is 69 lines. So if we move the cursor down, we'll see that the line changes, and if we move the cursor across, we'll see that the column changes. The other thing that we could do if we wanted to was from this file keys is to clear the workspace. And so we could press F6 clear workspace, and the workspace is cleared and we've lost our file. So let's get our file back because we're going to need it for future illustrations. So I'm going to press F1 get memo, and the name of the file is keypad, and we've got it back again. So now we're in one level from our Memo Maker menu, and F8 usually gets us out of menus, lower level menus. And so in fact, F8 is Memo Maker main, and we'll press that. And what we see is, once again, file keys, block keys, format keys, and print keys. Now, block keys is a very important set of keys, and it's useful for manipulating text. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. Let's move the cursor down there, and we'll press F2 block keys. Now, say we want to cut out a block. We don't like that first paragraph. What we would do is we press F1, cut out a block. And then we simply move the cursor to define, and you can see the inverse video there showing us what we blocked. And so you just simply move the cursor to cover the area that you want blocked. And then you've got to tell Memo Maker when you're done. So you press F5, block OK, and that paragraph just disappeared. Now, suppose you really didn't want to lose that paragraph. You just wanted to move it. Turns out that paragraph is not history yet. It's still around. It's stored in again, temporary memory, in main memory, outside of the Memo Maker file here, but it still exists. And all we have to do is move our cursor. Let's move to the end of the whole document. The way I moved to the end was I held down the extend character key and pressed the right arrow, which is down home to the bottom. Now I want to add that first paragraph at the end, and the way I do that is I paste the block. So F3 is paste block. I press F3, and there that paragraph reappears. If for some reason I wanted that paragraph to appear twice, then I could just press F3 again, and it would again reappear. So until we cut out another block, anytime we press paste block, the information that we had last cut out will be pasted. Suppose we really just want to copy a block. We don't want to cut it out. What we might do, let's try another example. I'm going to move the cursor up to, and this time we're going to do something small. By the way, one way to go through a Memo Maker file quickly, or a line, is tab. Tab's usually a real nice, quick way, or Shift Tab gets you back. Now, I want to use this phrase, touch tone 3, which is the name of this numeric keypad, several times. And so I'm going to copy the block. I don't really want to erase it, so I press F2, copy block, and then I highlight it, and then I press block OK, because I've highlighted. In fact, let me move the cursor back 1, because I don't want that space after the 3. Now I'll type block OK, and nothing happened. The reason why nothing happened is that we didn't want anything to happen right there. We wanted to make a copy of it. We didn't want to delete it there. So let's just move this down in an arbitrary place. Let's just say we want to copy it here. And remember, we're in insert mode. And so all we have to do is paste the block. So we press F3 again, and we just pasted the block. We press F3 again, we can paste again. Now that's interesting. Remember I had covered touch tone 3, and what appeared there is just touch tone. And the reason is that I actually did need to go one space beyond. Let me just go up there, because this is a good general point here. I went copy block, and then I moved the cursor here. And actually, we weren't there, in a sense. We were one character to the left, so we need to move one more character to cover up to touch tone 3. If we had a blinking line cursor, it maybe seem clearer. But remember, this is a box cursor, so that box is occupying and looks the same as if we had blocked it. So now we're going to press block OK again. I'm going to move the cursor here. I'm going to do paste block F3, and there's touch tone 3. Do it again, touch tone 3. So every time we paste a block, we're just pasting what was last either cut out or copied. Now we've made a mess, basically, of this paragraph. And suppose we wanted to align, in fact, let's make it even messier first. See if I can, maybe we'll just, I'm going to delete some characters by pressing extend character minus character. And we'll make that line a little bit shorter. And I'm going to tab and move the cursor down a little bit. And I'm going to use extend character clear line to delete some more text. And what's happening is the rest of the line gets deleted. And now what I want, and let's in practice I would be doing this for some reason. Now I'm just doing it for demonstration purposes. But what I want to do is align that paragraph. In other words, I want to put the margins back and make each line go to the proper point to the right. And you'll see what I mean in a second. So I'm going to put the cursor at the beginning of the paragraph. I'm going to align the block. That was F4. I'm going to move the cursor down to cover that whole mixed up paragraph. And now I'm going to go block OK. And as soon as I do that, you'll see all the gaps will disappear, and I'll have a nice aligned paragraph. There it was, excuse me, nicely aligned. Now, some people, in fact, one other thing here. Sometimes when you do such a radical thing and you align a block of text, you find out you really don't want to do it. You get cold feet. You've done something that's not right. And so they've actually asked you to verify it. And so F5 is alignment OK. And so it's OK. Now suppose we actually wanted to right justify the right part of the text. In other words, we wanted every right letter to line up nicely the way it naturally does on the left side. What we'd do is simply align the block. We'd move the cursor down to cover that same territory. We press F1, and you see an asterisk is in the justify box there. That means justify is on. We type block OK, and you can see it again asks us if the alignment was OK, and it is. We do alignment OK, and you see that the right characters are lined up. And the way Memo Maker did this was just, in an intelligent way, place spaces. Like here, for example, here, if we look originally, and then space, space, owned, space, space, and space, space, and so on. And anyway, the point here is that Memo Maker nicely lined up the right margin as well as the left margin. Enhance block is useful if you want to underline or bold. So we'll do that very quickly. Let's say we want to underline touchtone. So I'm just going to work through it here. F5 is enhance block. And we want to enhance it with an underline rather than bold. So I'll press F1. And then I'll move the cursor over. And the block's OK. And it actually shows up on underline in the text. And if I were to print it out, then we would be able to print it underlined. Now the Memo Maker main key, let's get back and look at a few more keys briefly. We see the format keys. So I'm going to press F3 format keys. And we see on the top of the screen are tabs and margin. Now let's say that we don't want the left margin to be all over to the left. We want it to be, say, column 10 rather than column 1. So what I would do is I would move the cursor, let's put it close to here, to the point where we actually want the margin. And then I press F1, left margin. And we'll find that from now on, the margin is at actually column 11. And we know that by looking at the top line there. We're in line 54, column 11. And similarly, if we wanted to set a new tab, we could set a new tab here if we wanted to. F3 is set tab, and we have yet another tab. So let's get out of format keys, Memo Maker main, and see what that has given us. On the surface, it hasn't given us much. But let's go to the end of the whole document. Extend character down arrow for next. And when we start, I'm going to start typing in the middle here. I'm just typing just to do it quickly. What's going to happen is that automatically, there we go. What happens is, without pressing the return key, the cursor automatically moves to the next line when it finds the right end of the margin. Now, suppose we want to reformat our whole document, because after all, we really wanted this margin setting. What we would do is we'd just do what we did a minute ago. I press extend character up arrow. I move the cursor to the beginning. I get into, we have to get out of oh no, actually we're fine here. We want to get into file keys because we want to align the whole thing. And no, let's see, the wrong set here. We'll get into its block keys because we're going to align a block. So we'll press F2 block keys. We're going to highlight the whole section. Actually, we have to press F4 align block. And then we're justify, it still remembers it's on. We're going to the end. Well, here we'll just start going down. And now I get lazy and I want to go right to the end. So I press extend character right arrow to go to the end. And now what I've done is I've captured the whole block. And we're going to press block OK. And it takes a minute because there's quite a bit of information now that we're reformatting. And there we go. We have now created our document that's right justified with a left margin of 11. The alignment was great, and we have what we want. So let's go back to Memo Maker main. By the way, if you ever, there's certain keys and you're not finding them, the best thing to do is look at F8, and F8 will probably say Memo Maker main, which means that you're not in the main menu. You've traversed down some of that menu tree. So we'll press F8, and now we'll get into print keys. Now, one thing is very important if you're going to print is that your printer is connected to your HP Portable. And if we look, I bet that our printer is not connected. And so what I'm going to do, and we'll show you in detail how to make this connection later, but I am going to simply put in the chords and get ready to print. Now, so often people have problems with printers, and 80% of the time it's simply that the connection isn't correct. So we've just gotten, let's go back to Memo Maker main, and then let's F4 is back to the printer. And we can, by pressing F5, print memo. There are other options, like if F2 auto feed is on, what will happen is the entire document will get printed. If F2 auto feed is off, what happens is only a page at a time will get printed, and then you'll be prompted, then you can print another page. And that's for printers that you just feed one sheet at a time. But the ThinkJet has continuous paper. And so we're going to want to print the whole thing. So I'm going to push F2 and asterisk and auto feed. There are other things you can do, like skipping a page and double spacing and so on. So let's just F5, print memo, and we're printing. At any point, we can cancel the printing, and so I'm going to press F8 to cancel. And you'll notice it keeps printing even though I pressed F8. And the reason is that there was some memory, there was some information that was stored in the printer. And the printer remembers that. And so it has to get rid of all that information before it can really stop printing. So we'll go back to Memo Maker main, which is F8. And we really have done quite a job here on our file. And we just want to exit Memo Maker, which is F8. And it reminds us that we never saved the file. And it prompts us to save it as keypad. We don't want to save it because we've made a mess of it. And so we're going to say F6, no discard. And we're back. Memo Maker is a Hewlett-Packard program, so this is one program where you're not going to be able to go to your local bookstore. There really isn't that much written about Memo Maker. However, the documentation that's included in your manual is quite good. And because the program is so easy to use, I think just experimenting around, using the basic overview that I just gave you, and reading that manual, and you'll be up and running very soon in Memo Maker. Lotus 123, a spreadsheet with many uses. Lotus is a tremendously useful program. We can use it for budgeting and other numerical functions, or we can use it to keep track of things, to keep track of names and addresses and so on. And we'll actually be creating small Lotus spreadsheets in a few minutes to show you how to do that. So let's first start Lotus. Let's look at our 110 portable and start Lotus. So as usual, we have to move the cursor to start the application and press return. And we find that we're in Lotus, or we're almost there. We have to press any key. And here's something that's interesting. If you have just purchased a 110, you're going to get this error message, missing our legal configuration file. And it's actually a very small bug in the system. If you press return, that will go away. If you don't want to ever see that message again, then just follow what I'm going to tell you without really understanding what I'm doing. I'm going to press the slash key, which is right below the question mark, and then W, and then G, and then D, and then U, and then Q for quit, and we'll never get that message again. Now, Lotus is a spreadsheet, and a spreadsheet is a matrix. And what I mean by a matrix, what I mean is that there is a series of columns. Here we have A, column B, column C, and so on, column H, and a series of rows, and we see on the screen 1 through 11. In fact, we have many columns, more columns and rows than fit on the screen. For example, if I move my cursor down, notice the big black cursor, what we call the cell pointer, moves down. And here we're at 11, and now we're at 12, and 13, and 14. And similarly, we can move it to the right, and we're at the letter H, or the column H, and then at the column I, and so forth. And so we see that this is a very large series of cells. Each cell is the intersection of a column and a row. We see this is in column J. This is row 14, so this is cell J14. What I just did was went back home to A1. I pressed extend character and left arrow, and that, remember, is our home key. And so now we're back at cell A1. In fact, it tells us on the upper left-hand screen, of the portion of the screen, that we're in cell 1. If we move the cursor down, we're in A2. If you move the cursor to the right, we're in cell B2. On the right, we see what's called a mode. It tells us what mode we're in. And we're in ready mode. It's like we're ready for action. And there's all sorts of kinds of actions that we can do. Lotus itself, when you create a spreadsheet, all you're doing is putting either text or numbers into cells. So right now we're in cell B2. I could type anything I want. I could type Jones for a last name. And I must have pressed the wrong key, but now I'll type Jones. Now, before I press return, note that as I typed, on the upper left-hand corner, Jones was typed. In the upper right, what happened was that the ready changed to label. And so anytime I type alphabetic information, it turns out it's a label. And we're in label mode. Now, to enter Jones and to put Jones into B1, I just simply press return. And now Jones is in B2, excuse me. If I move the cursor back to A2, then we can put Sam. So Shift S, A, M. And again, that's shifted us into label mode. I press return, and there's Sam Jones. Now, there are several other modes that are in the computer. And what we'll do here, we've got Sam Jones, and what we're going to do is list his zip code. And so his zip code happens to be 52556. Now notice, again, the numbers appeared on the upper left while I was typing it. And in the upper right, it tells us we're putting in a number or a value as opposed to some letters, a label. So we're in, you could say we're in value mode now. So let's press return. Now let's just put a comment. What we're doing here, we're slowly building up a mini name and address book for the purposes of this example. And we'll just put a comment. We'll say he's a friend. And press return. So far, so good. There is one more mode, or actually two more modes that we'll be talking about. And then we'll move on to creating this mini database of names and zip codes and comments. If we press the slash key, which is right below the question mark, what will happen is a menu will pop up. And so we'll do that. We'll press the slash. Now, this menu system is different than the other ones we've seen. In previous times, we've seen function keys and labels. Lotus works with a different menu system, but it really is, in fact, the same concept of going layer into deeper until you get at the command that you want to do. So we notice on the upper right, there it tells us we're in menu mode. And these are, you can imagine, since we're now used to labels, you can think of a label that says worksheet, one that says range, one that says copy. To move to those different menu choices, I simply move the cursor key. And then we will be at the different cursor options. And I'll be going over some of these possibilities in a minute, but I just wanted to give you the overview first. Another way of going is that we could just type the first letter. So quit's a long way to move the cursor to quit. So I could just type the first letter for Q, and I'll just do that. And it asks me, when I press Q, do I really want to quit? And in fact, and here's the neat trick that you should all be aware of, is that the line under any menu choice always gives you more information. So this one says if I press return for no, it says do not end 1, 2, 3 session, return to ready mode, which is exactly what I wanted to do. However, if I move the cursor to yes, it tells us end 1, 2, 3 session, remember to save your worksheet first. Very important reminder, by the way, because that's the only reminder you're going to get. Now, I really want to not leave Lotus, so I'm going to type the letter N, and we'll be back in business here. I'm going to bring the menu up just to show you once more something interesting. So I'll press the slash key, and we're in menu mode. And notice that the second line is not a continuation of the first, but just tells you what the next layer of menu is. So if I press return, or W, because I'm at worksheet, then this global insert, delete, column width, and so on will move up a line, because that's the next layer. And so, in fact, that's what I'm going to do, just to show you that I'm right. So I'm going to press return, and we can see that global, insert, delete, column width are my now choices. And so, for example, if I move the cursor to C column width, then I will be able to set the display width of the current column. And we'll see what that means in a minute. Now, I really don't want to be in menu mode right now. I want to enter more data. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to escape. And I'm going to press the escape key in the lower left part of your keyboard. And I will keep getting out of the menu until I'm back into ready mode. So it turns out that Sam Jones is a friend. And let's make this a little bit nicer. Let's have some titles. So I'm going to move the cursor up to, and then home to A1. And I'm going to put a title. So I'm going to just call this first for first name. In fact, why don't I put it in caps to distinguish it? So F-I-R-S-T, and then last, and then zip, and then comment. Now what I'm going to do is enter the name of our director of operations who showed you how to install your ROM drawer. And I'm going to put Larry in. Now to enter, I can do one of two things. I could just simply press return, which I'll do right here, or I could do something else, and I'll show you in a minute. So Baldozier, B-A-L-D-O-Z-I-E-R. Press return. Now, what you may or may not be able to see is that there's a potential problem here. His name Baldozier, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Actually, we've just made it. Exactly fits into the column width. Suppose his name was Baldozier E. So I'm going to edit that particular label. And the way I edit is I press F2, which stands for edit. So F2 puts me in edit mode, which is the final mode that I wanted to show you. And we see in the upper right that we're in edit mode. And I'm just going to add a couple letters to Larry's name. I'm sure he won't mind. How about X, Y, Z? And press return. And what's happened is you've seen that Larry's gotten a little fat here for his column, and that he's moved over a little bit to column C. And if I typed a number here, what would happen would be, let's say 8888, press return, is those last letters of Larry would disappear. And so something has to be done, because we may have last names that are 12 or 15 characters. And so what we're going to do, I'm going to move the cursor back to cell B3. I'm going to change the column width. By default, the column width is 9. But to change it, all I have to do is get into my menu, where I press /, and then I type W for worksheet, seeing that column width is below that, so W. And then C. This time I could press C, but this time I'm just decided I'm going to move the cursor to column width. I press return. I want to set the column, so set the width of the current column. And I want to set it to, say, 15. And I press return, and now Larry Baldozier XYZ is in the last name field. And we'll put, for comment here, director. Okay. Now, one of the things I was about to tell you was that I could just press return to enter the name director, or I could actually be a little more dynamic. I could move a cursor key. I could just press a left arrow, a down arrow, and do two things at once. And so by entering any of the 4 cursor keys, up arrow, down arrow, left arrow, or right arrow, I'm actually entering the entry there. And so I'm right now going to press, since I want to go back to column A, I'm going to press left arrow, and we see that director got entered into cell D3. So I'm going to move down there and then down, and ready yet for another entry. And so let's put in our shipping manager, Rick. And now I'm going to go right arrow, Fennell. And then I'm going to go to right arrow. And it turns out that his zip code is one of these funny zip codes that have an extra 4 digits to it. So it's 95403-2107. And you'll see in a second this is going to cause us some interesting problem. Remember that we've called this 954. And so I'm going to press return, And what happened was that we got a number here that's 93296. And so what happened was, because the computer was entering a value rather than a label, it actually performed the arithmetic subtraction. And we can see on the upper left that what it did is just subtracted the second portion from the first. So this brings up a dilemma. How do we tell Lotus that we just want the real entry there? We don't want to do the subtraction. We tell it by simply editing it and telling it it's a label. And I'll show you how to do that. We're going to press F2 to edit the particular key, label there. It's now still a value. And I'm going to move the cursor. I hope you can see this on the camera. The cursor is now at under the 9 and blinking. It's an underlined cursor. And I'm going to put an apostrophe. And the apostrophe tells the Lotus that we're entering a label. So we press return, and the number got entered. Now, to be consistent, we really need to do the same. So what we'll do is we will press F2, and very quickly extend character left arrow puts us at the beginning, and put apostrophe there. And then we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to do F2, extend character left arrow to move us at the beginning, press apostrophe, and we've now put 3 zips in there. And it looks like our column width is a little bit not quite big enough, so we're going to give it an extra character. I'm just going to go /WCS12, and I've set the column width at 12. Remember, as I go through this all, I want to give you a feeling as well as teaching you all these specific items. And with this background, then you'll be able to really go much more deeply, more quickly into Lotus. So we'll put shipping here. Okay, now we have enough information already to show you some very interesting characteristics, the power of Lotus. Imagine, in fact, we'd probably have a list of maybe 30 or 50 or 100 or 500 names, whatever what we needed. But what I'm going to do is show you what we can do with this list and the power of using Lotus for lists. And the main power is that we can sort this list any way we want. Right now, we see that the list is not in alphabetical order. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort the list very quickly, and it's even more quickly if I didn't have to explain exactly what I'm going to do, in alphabetical order by last name. So we're going into one of our menu options. So again, we press the / key below the question mark, and we'll get our menu up. And now we're going into the data menu, and so I'm just going to type D, and we want to sort, and so I press S, and then the first thing we have to do is tell Lotus the range that we're going to sort, and so that's data range, and so I'm already there, so I can press return, and it tells us we're starting at A2, and now what I want to do is I want to sort the items that are contained in A2 through D4. And the first thing to do is I'm going to do what we call anchoring the range. And ranges are used all the time in Lotus. So this concept will come up in this illustration a few times, this idea of range. But this is very important. We're going to anchor the range by pressing period. Now we press down, and you see what I mean by anchor. It was anchored on Sam here. We've covered the range of information we want to sort. We press return. Now we go to the primary key. We want to tell Lotus what we want to sort by. And so we press P for primary key. There, we see primary key. And we move to the column that we want to sort by. It's B2. We press return. It asks us whether we want it descending or ascending. And in fact, we want ascending because we want it alphabetical from A to Z. So we type A. We press return. And now all we have to do is go. And go is just the letter G. Or this time I'll just move the cursor to go. I'm going to press return. And right now you see Jones on top. If we did it right, Baldozer will be on top, followed by Fennell, followed by Jones. So let's press return, and in fact, it worked. Now, I could have just as easily sorted by zip. I'm just going to very quickly go through the step just to show you that we could do that. So I'm going to go slash data sort. The range is already defined, so I don't even have to push it again. But just to be safe, I'm going to. So it's already defined. And the primary key now becomes the zip. So I'm going to move it over one. And we want it in ascending order, and the A is on the screen. We press return, and now we just go. And what should happen is the 52556 should become the first, and the 8 should be the second. So we're going to go, and in fact, it worked. Now, if we wanted to print our listing out, what we would do is we would go slash print. We want to print to a printer. We want to define a range because we have to tell Lotus what we want to print. So we press return. And again, we have to move the cursor to the start. There we want to start with the first, with the word first. I'll press period to anchor it. I move the cursor to cover the range here. The range is covered. I could have actually typed in A1 through D4, but I'd personally much rather point to where I want to my range rather than have to look at the cells and type it in. Press return, and then we just type go, and we are printing out our mini database. Now, we're finished with this particular Lotus application, so I'm going to press escape here. I'm finished printing first, so let's escape, 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 and that gets us out. And I want to save this file in case I ever want to add to it. So I go slash, F for file, S for save, and then we'll call this database, we'll call this names. So I'm going to type in a file name, N-A-M-E-S, press return, and it's saved. And so I can leave Lotus and come back and recall names. And so now what I'm going to do is create a different kind of spreadsheet. But before I do that, I think I'm just going to prove to you that names is not lost. So I'm going to erase the workspace by going slash worksheet, erase, yes, and our worksheet has gone away. If I wanted to retrieve names, all I would have to go is slash, F for file, R for retrieve. I could either type in the word names or just move my cursor to names. It actually remembered it for me. And then press return, and names would appear. Now again, because of the scope of this tape, I'm going through a number of these commands quickly, but I think with it, I'm going through the most important ones. You're going to have a very strong basis for learning Lotus. I'm going to erase the worksheet again by going slash W-E-Y, and our worksheet is gone. Now I'm going to create a budget, a very simple 3-month budget. So I'm going to title it 3-month budget. And unfortunately, when I press return, we're going to have a problem again. I pressed return, and what happened was it beeped at me because as soon as it saw the 3, it thought we were doing some kind of numerical analysis, where in fact we were just entering 3-month budget. So I'm going to move the cursor again to the end there, put in the apostrophe, press return, and it'll let me do 3-month budget. Yeah, 3-month budget. Let's put some titles here. And so we'll call this first one item. And the second one is January. The next column we'll call Feb. And the next one we'll call Mar. And the next one we'll call totals. Okay. Now, anticipating the problem that we faced last time, the item may be more than 9 characters, so we're going to change the column width, /WCS15. And we're really ready to enter a very few items. Okay, one item that we'll need to enter is rent. And we're in Iowa, and the rent here is not New York City, fortunately, for those of us in Fairfield, Iowa. So our monthly rent is about $300. And we'll press return. And that rent stays constant. So what I could do is type 300 under February and 300 under March, but instead what I'm going to do is simply copy that 300 over. And what I'll do is do the slash, and then there's a C, copy, and I'll just move the cursor to copy and press return. And it asks me to enter the range that I'm copying, and here's the keyword from. And it prompts me, since I'm already there, B5 to B5. And in fact, that's where I am, and that's where I want to copy it from. I only want to copy one cell, so I press return. And it asks me where I want the range to copy to. And so I move the cursor under February. I anchor again, because we're going to actually define a range. So I press period. And then I move the cursor. And I will, as soon as I press return, copy the 300 to the next 2 columns. I'm copying it to C5 through D5. And so I am pressing return. And there's 300 in January, February, and March. Now you notice that one thing here is that the numbers are automatically what we call right justified. In other words, as far right as possible. And labels are left justified. We're going to rectify that one way in a few minutes, because there's a way of putting in $ automatically. But let's center January, February, and March. So I'll move the cursor up to January. I'm going to type F2. I'm going to move the cursor back. And see that apostrophe there? We're going to backspace to delete the apostrophe and put in a caret sign. And the caret will automatically mean center it. So in other words, apostrophe means left justify, caret means center, and quote marks actually means right justify. Now it's actually just as quick for me to type it in from scratch, so I'm going to just type, notice in the upper left corner when I'll be typing, I'll be caret, and then FEB return, and that centers February, and now we'll center March on the same way with a caret, and then MAR, and March is centered. So we've got some other items. We've got utilities. Let's see if I can spell it right there. It's not a tough one. And 1 month in January, it's cold. It's cold here in Fairfield, Iowa, $160 maybe for, and then it's a little bit better in February, and quite a bit better actually in March. And then we have food we have to eat in Iowa or New York or wherever. And say our budget is $10 a day, so it's 300 there. I'll just enter it in, 300. By the way, be sure to enter zeros and not O's for you people who are used to a typewriter. It's very important. And actually our appetite goes up in March with the spring. And so let's say it's 350 there. Okay, so we have enough to start creating, just seeing what our cost of living is. So we're going to have another totals column here. And what we'll be able to do is see our monthly totals and see our totals by item. Now there are a number of ways to enter, to add or manipulate numbers. And just for, although I wouldn't do this probably in practice the way I'm going to do it now, I'm going to show you several of these ways. So to get the total rent, what I will be doing is I'm going to multiply 3 times 300. That's all. It's constant. And so the way I'm going to do this is 3. And then I'm going to enter the Lotus time sign. And the Lotus time sign is actually an asterisk. In fact, in computers in general, most often asterisk means time. So I'm going to press Shift 8, which is the asterisk. And then I could just type 300, but because I'm lazy and I also want to show you something, I'm going to move the cursor over one, point to the 300. And so what you'll see there on the screen is 300, and you see in the upper left corner 3 asterisk D5. And in fact, that's what we want to do. We want to multiply 3 times the cell D5. And all I have to do is press return, and 900 gets printed automatically. For this next utilities, we're going to add a different way. I'm going to actually, manually, type the different cells that we're going to add together. So I'm going to, first thing I have to do is I have to use a plus sign. Now here's the trick here. I go plus, and then I type the letter of this, the name of this cell, which is B6, and then plus again, and we'll do C6, and then plus again, and then D6, and then press return. And before I press return, I want to make sure you understand why I emphasize the plus at the beginning. If I hadn't put plus, what the computer or Lotus would have thought was that I was entering a label that just happened to start with B6. In other words, maybe it was the name of a funny zip code or something in some country. But to tell it that I wanted the cell, I wanted to start adding the cell B6, I had to go plus B6. So now I press return, and there's the total over here. In the next line, we're going to add yet another way. I'm going to start with plus again, but this time instead of typing B7, I'm going to move the cursor over to B7. Then I'm going to press plus again, and notice it bounced back to the beginning as soon as I put an arithmetic operating sign. And I move the cursor to my second place, and I want to add a third column, so I press plus and move the cursor here, and now I have, in my upper left, I see automatically it says B7 plus C7 plus D7, which is exactly what I want. I press return, and we have yet another total. Now I'm going to show you yet one other way of generating a total. It's called functions in Lotus. There's a number of built-in functions, and the most commonly used one is sum. And every Lotus function starts with the @ sign. That's the shift 2. So we're going to go shift 2, and then type sum, and then left parentheses. And then once again, I'm going to move my cursor to where I want to sum. So I want to sum starting with B5. I'm going to, anchor by pressing period. I'm going to move the cursor down to cover the range that I want to sum. I've covered it, and you see in the upper left there is a indication of what I'm doing with sum, and so I'm summing B5 through B7. I want to close that function by pressing the end of the parentheses, and I'm done, so I'll press return, and voila, we have our sum. Now, because I don't want to really have to repeat this 3 more times, there's a very simple Lotus function where we can put totals in each of the next 3 columns. And so the way we do this is we just go slash copy. We want to copy from cell B9, so we press return. We want to copy to, and we'll anchor it here, C9, and we want to copy it all the way across here. And what will happen is that Lotus is smart enough to actually shift the arguments in the sum function to the appropriate arguments in each of the different columns. So I'll press return, and there we have the different sums automatically computed. And if we look in our upper left-hand corner, we see that Lotus was smart enough to make the sum C5 to C7, whereas before it used to be B5 to B7. So when it copies, unless you tell it otherwise, it copies what we call in a relative way. So now it's time to print out our budget. We go slash, print, range. And again, let's start here to print it out. We'll anchor it. And then, oops, I noticed that if we do this, what will happen, we'll leave out our title. And so we've anchored it in the wrong space. And to delete the anchor, we press the backspace key. And now let's go to, actually, we have to highlight the whole square. And so we press period. And then we move and cover the whole square we want to print. And then we press return. And then we can go to print. There's one final thing I want to show you to pretty up this spreadsheet. And that is that we can automatically make all these numbers dollar signs. So first let's cue to quit out of the print menu. We'll move the cursor to the 300, and we'll use the slash range format. And then we want to format cells in currency. So that's a C. So I'll press return. And let's say we don't need any decimal points. It asks us for the number of decimal places, so we'll press 0. We press return. Now we move and copy make the range of the cells that we want to put in dollar format. We press return, and we have all the dollar signs automatically put in. So now it's time to save our file, so we go slash FS, and the name of our file is, we'll call it budget. Press return, and we've saved the file, and we're ready to quit Lotus. So we go slash Q, and it asks us, do we really want to end it? And in fact, this time we really do want to end Lotus. So we press Y, and we're out of Lotus, and we're back into PAM. There's one other thing I'd like to point out about Lotus. When you buy your HP 110 or Portable Plus, you get a template with it that fits across the keyboard. It's actually a plastic template. And what the template does, it tells you the use of the function keys within Lotus. If we at any time had pressed F1, we would have gotten help. And this is a very, very important aspect of Lotus that is worth taking the time to get used to. You can get help, you can find out a lot of information without ever having to look at the manual by just pressing F1 help. In the example, when we showed Lotus, we talked a lot about editing, and you see that F2 is edit. The rest of the keys are really beyond the scope of this tape, but perhaps one of the things that you can see by the many different functions is that even though what we did was what 80% of what most Lotus users do, the example that we just showed, in fact, Lotus is a very rich program with many, many, many different functions and many different possible applications. Now, if you're going to learn more about Lotus, what you can do is so there are several things you can do. Again, you can go to your local bookstore, and you will find even more books on Lotus than you found on DOS. There are many books. Some of my favorites are the Q publications, using 123 or Lotus tips and tricks. The other thing you can do is work through the tutorial that comes on an external disk with your 110 or Portable Plus when you buy Lotus, or you can be using the manual and use it as a reference as you go through. Summary, Lotus 123. In Lotus 123, you manipulate numerical and textual information placed in cells. Lotus functions and concepts discussed. Understanding the Lotus screen. Recognizing different Lotus modes, ready, value, label, menu, edit. Referencing a cell, like we did with plus A1. Entering numbers and labels. using Lotus as a database. That was when we entered the names. Sorting, using Lotus as a spreadsheet when we entered our budget. Performing numeric operations such as adding and multiplying. Using numeric functions, in this case we used sum. Copying, changing the column width, saving and retrieving files, working with ranges, and we anchored using the period, and we released the anchor using the backspace, formatting a range in dollars, and printing. Communications on the HP 110 and Portable Plus. Now we're going to look very briefly at communications with the HP 110 Portable and the Portable Plus. The Portable Plus comes with a built-in program called Term, and the HP 110 comes with a built-in program called Terminal. For various reasons that we'll discuss shortly, you may seriously want to consider a different communications package with both the Portable Plus and the 110. But let's look at what's actually built into the machines. Portable Plus built-in term program. The Portable Plus comes with a very primitive terminal program built in. In other words, you can actually call other computers, but as we'll see in a moment, it's very limited in its functionality and what it can transfer, the kinds of files it can transfer. Now, this program, I guess HP was so I would say ashamed, but it didn't even make it an application, a PAM application. And so to start the program, we actually have to either enter DOS or from PAM type the word term. And so that's what I'm going to do. From PAM, I'm going to type T-E-R-M. I'm going to press return. And we're going to be in a program called term. And this is a program that lets you access other computers. It's so that the Portable Plus can function as a terminal to another computer. And it gives you minimum capabilities of transferring files back and forth. The main limitation with term, besides the fact that very little capability, automatic capability is built in, and that'll be clear in a minute. The main limitation is that you can only transfer what's called ASCII files, which are a kind of file that you could create with Memo Maker, and in a way you could create with Lotus, but it's not a pure Lotus file. We could say a pure Lotus file or a pure Memo Maker file. It's the result. An ASCII file is like what you would print to a printer. But once you, for example, in Lotus saved a file as a ASCII file or a PRN file, then you could not get back many of the capabilities. You would lose a lot of the numerical formulas that are built into Lotus. So if you want to transfer a program file or a Lotus file or a complex word processing file, you would actually need other software. But if you just want to log on to like CompuServe, as we did earlier in the example, then term may do the trick for you. So let's use term and dial into CompuServe again. To do so, we're going to have to actually know some of the language that the modem understands. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to type the following: ATX1. And actually, that should have been a capital X. I'm going to do it again, ATX1. And I'll press return, and we'll get another OK. Now, what we did here, maybe the vast majority of you won't need to do, but here in Fairfield, unfortunately, our phone lines are, they're not so good, at least out of some phone connections. And if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been able to call out. What I did was really disable critical checking of the phone line. And so, in other words, I made it so that it would be more liberal, more easy to transfer data, but at the same time more easy to make mistakes when data is transferred. Now I'm going to dial my phone number, and I have to type A, T, D, T, which is modemese for, in other words, the language the modem understands for I'm going to dial a phone number. And then I'll type the number 1-816-474-3770. I'm going to press return, and we're in the process of dialing. And so right now the computer is actually just as if it was somebody pushing the tones there. It's dialing this phone number to get to Kansas City. And if we're lucky, yeah, we are. We've connected. And now we're going to hold down the control key and press C, which is what CompuServe requires to get on. Now I'll type my ID, which is 72557-714. And incidentally, if any of you are in CompuServe, drop me a note and tell me your opinion of this tape or anything else you'd like to talk about. And then I'll type in my password, which you won't see echoed on your screen. The designers were smart enough to realize that somebody might be looking over somebody else's shoulder, and it cost $12.50 an hour, so somebody could run up quite a bill. And it said that my password wasn't good. I'll try it once more. And this time it looks like I made it. Nope. We'll try it once more, and then if not, we've really done what I wanted to do anyways, which is show you how to log on. I'm on. I made it. Nope. Nope. This is what CompuServe was smart enough to realize that there's what we call hackers. And they may just try somebody's numbers and keep trying experiments until they get the right password. So it told me that my access to CompuServe network and computer system is limited only to authorized users. So it essentially accused me of trying to get on in a not fair way. The thing is, with my password, normally I'd never have to use it because I've got it pre-programmed into my Term Plus program, which I showed you at the very beginning of this tape. So all I have to do is press return, and it automatically types in my password. So I may have, in fact, been typing in the wrong password. So let's exit out of Term Plus, which was F8. Press any key, and I'm back into PAM. The HP 110 built-in terminal program. When using the HP 110, you can use the terminal program that you can use with the 300 baud modem. So let's look at the terminal program. We're going to move the cursor over and start terminal. And we're loading the program. Now the thing with this program, and the reason why I recommend that you might want other software, is that it works, and it can do quite a lot of things in terms of transferring files, and you can even automate things like the logon sequence that I just showed you. But the problem is that the documentation really isn't up to snuff, and there are just a few bugs, and enough bugs in the terminal program that some people find it's difficult. There's another program that we've made available called Term 110 that will work on the portable, HP 110 portable, and it's very easy to use. At the same time, there are other users that are very satisfied with this program, and so it's just a matter of playing around with it, looking through the manual and actually looking at our back issues of the portable paper where we walk you through how to use this particular program. Now the first thing that you're asked is the name of what's called a configuration file. And we have no configuration file, so we press return. There's one hint that I want you to know that's caused many 110 users hours of frustration, and it's just so simple. If we press the menu key, which is located to the right of the F4 key, the menu goes away. If we press the menu key again, the menu, in other words, the 8 function key labels at the bottom of the screen will reappear. Certain times when you're using the program, these labels go away, and if you don't realize that pressing menu brings it back, you may be hopelessly lost. So the terminal program makes use of the function keys like memo maker, and what we're going to do is the simplest possible operation. I just want to show you that we can use the HP 110 to call Kansas City again to log into CompuServe. So I'm going to go into F5, terminal config. Now I'm going to just skip all of these things, comment if I want to just explain what this is. So well, maybe I'll just type in CompuServe. If I wanted to actually automate my log on into CompuServe with my password and my numbers, there's actually a way to doing that, but I'm not going to for the purpose of this tape. We'll then go down to phone number, and I just simply type in the phone number, and it's 1, and I could use dashes if I want, so I'm going to. 816-474-3770. And I press return, and now we're set up that we can dial CompuServe. What I'm going to do is store this particular configuration so that I could call CompuServe again if I wanted to. So I'm going to press F2, store file, and I enter a file name, so we'll just call it CIS for CompuServe Information Service, and then I'll just add my own little 3-character extension, CFG for configuration. That's the way I usually name my configuration type files. Press return, and it's telling me I'm storing it. And now we're ready to exit the configuration, and we're ready to dial. Now, if I knew that we wanted to either download information, in other words, capture information from CompuServe, or upload information into CompuServe, I would press F3 or F4, which are other configuration menus. But for the purpose of this tape, I just want to dial. So I press F2, which is dial, and it actually tells me that I'm dialing the number. So that gives me hope. And it tells me now that I'm waiting for a carrier. In other words, I'm waiting for the other modem to say, hey, I've heard you, I'm ready to start talking. Now when I say hope, communication, in my opinion, is still up. Look, we're connected already. So now we press Control-C, and it asks me for my user ID. And maybe you noticed it printed out a lot slower than the last time. So it's 72257, 714, and it's going to ask me my password, and we'll see if I can get it right this time. Notice that 300 baud, that's a fourth as fast as the Portable Plus modem. It is slower. So we'll see what the problem is, see if I can actually type in my password here. And I press return, and this time I made it. I'm on. And it tells me my last access was earlier today when we logged on before. It gives me a copyright notice, and then it tells me I have my electronic mail waiting, and that it gives me a menu, actually another kind of menu, a CompuServe menu that tells me the kinds of things I can do within CompuServe. Travel information, electronic mall I could shop. And number 8's entertainment or games. There's just a whole, this just gives you a sense of the variety of use. You could go into a forum. If I typed the word Go HP, in fact, maybe I will, Go HP, what would happen is I would get into the Hewlett-Packard forum and get all sorts of information if I wanted to. And there's Hewlett-Packard engineers that man this forum. And if you have any questions about your portable, you can just ask them questions or ask other users questions. Now, we're not going to go into that right now, but it's a wonderful service. I recommend CompuServe, if for nothing else, just for support of your portables and just to talk to other portable and other Hewlett-Packard users around the country. So I'm going to type BYE, which hopefully will get me off CompuServe. It does. It tells me I'm exiting. Thank you for visiting the HP forum and for using CompuServe. It was 2 minutes of time, and I'm done. The HP 110 terminal program tells me I've lost my carrier. Hit any key to return, and I'm back in my terminal program. To exit, I press F8, exit terminal, and I'm back into PAM. Time Manager. Now we're going to talk very briefly about the Time Manager program. If you have a Portable Plus, you'll find that on one chip, both the Memo Maker program and the Time Manager program are found. If you have an HP 110 portable, the Time Manager program isn't built in. However, if you give us a call for the cost of duplicating the disk, we can actually send you Time Manager at a nominal charge for $9.50, which is probably the best bargain of the century, because Time Manager is a wonderful program. And you use Time Manager on the 110 from your RAM disk, so you load the program into your RAM disk. We'll show you how to do that in a few minutes. On the Portable Plus and our Portable Plus in our example here, Time Manager is built into ROM. And you actually have to run Time Manager from ROM rather than RAM on the Portable Plus. So let's look at Time Manager. Once again, we're going to move the cursor to start the application to Time Manager. And we move the cursor key to Time Manager, press return, and in a few seconds we'll be in the program. The program is actually so easy to use, and now that you're so familiar with navigating through menus with function keys, we're not going to really spend much time. If you ever need help, you just press the F7 help key, and it gives you all the information you need to get started. I pressed any key, I pressed the space bar to get out of it. If I wanted to add an appointment, I would press F1, and it gives me a list of my appointments. And notice in this case, it gives me the whole screen. When we had the calendar screen, let's look back. Let's remember this third appointment here, the 12 o'clock p.m. call, Luann. Let's go back to the calendar screen and notice that that appointment, the third appointment, is actually cut off. But if we went back to the appointment menu, we'll see that the whole message is there. If we want to set an appointment, we just press F1, set the appointment. It asks us the time, and it's for today. It's got the date. We could change the date. Let's in fact change the date. So we'll move the cursor up, move the cursor with the up arrow key, move it over, and I'm going to type 7, and so that's for tomorrow. And so now that's entered, and at 3 o'clock, oops, so we'll put the right there at 3 o'clock, and then it actually asks us whether we want the computer to beep at us at 3 o'clock. And let's say we do. And so we'll put Y there. And then we'll type the text, the information. And what we want to do is call home to see about Larry. Now, what you'll notice is on the screen here, there's that little bar. And what that bar tells you is how much is going to appear in your calendar screen. So call home to see ABO, maybe the U, will appear on the calendar screen, and the rest we'd have to get into it. And so we can press F1 to set the appointment. If we didn't want to set it, we'd press F2, but in this case we do, so we press F1. And the appointment is set, and we can get back to our calendar, which is F8. It's a nice way of saying exit is calendar, exit that menu. And we see on November 6th, we don't see anything because we set it for November 7th. So let's move the cursor with the right arrow to the 7th, November 7th, and we'll see the appointment at 3 o'clock a.m. We didn't say p.m., so 3 o'clock in the morning. We're supposed to call home to see about Larry. The ABO appeared. And the asterisk tells us that at 3 o'clock in the morning, the alarm's going to go off to remind us to do this. Perhaps what we would want to do is re-edit and put 1,500 hours to get in the 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which is what we really wanted to do.
Similarly, we could go into things to do to edit that screen. I pressed F2. We could add an item, F1, or erase an item, F2. If we ever needed help, we press F7, which is the help key, and it tells us what to do. And press any key to exit help, it tells us at the bottom, so we'll do that. We'll press F8, the calendar, and we're back at the calendar. It's just as simple to do names and addresses. If we typed notes, actually what would happen is that we would find ourselves in Memo Maker, and we can make our notes in Memo Maker. And then we would be back in Time Manager. Let's do it. So we press F3, which is Notes, and we're in Memo Maker, familiar screen. So we'll say this is a note, and now we'll exit Memo Maker. And it keeps the note in a file that it automatically tells Memo Maker with the name, the date of the current date, which is 11/7/88, period NOT. That's the name of the file. And yes, we'll save that note. So there's a series of notes that can be created every day. There's a name and address book. There's a search facility to search for names and addresses. We can archive information like to-dos and appointments, things if we don't want to keep big files around with our old to-do lists. We can get help, or we can exit. And in fact, that's what we're going to do. We're going to exit the Time Manager. And we're now back into PAM. Part 4, connecting the HP portables to peripherals. It's possible to connect our HP Portable Plus computer to a variety of different other devices. And in fact, we have a table full of different devices that we can connect the Portable Plus to. We have the ThinkJet printer, which we've already shown a number of times in this tape. We have the 9114 external disk drive, and you can connect a Portable Plus or an HP 110 to that. You can connect an HP Portable directly to an IBM compatible, such as this Compact Desk Pro. Or you can even connect your HP Portable to a letter quality printer, such as the HP DeskJet. Using the HP ThinkJet printer with the HP Portables. We've actually shown you quite a bit about using the HP ThinkJet with the HP Portables. We've printed Lotus files and Memo Maker files to the ThinkJet printer from the HP Portable. The way to make the connection is quite simple. We simply, we'll just turn this around, this ThinkJet printer around, get rid of the paper here, and we simply see that there's these two HPIL cords that plug right into the back of the ThinkJet printer, and that gets connected to the Portable Plus and is plugged into the back of the HP Portable Plus, and then we're able to print. There's actually a couple other steps that we need to do to make sure that we're able to print, and what we're going to have to do is configure our, tell the Portable Plus that we are going to be printing to the ThinkJet. And in fact, by default, when the Portable comes out of the factory, the Portable, it's assumed the Portable is going to print to the ThinkJet. But let's just take a look. So I've got to turn on my system, and we're going to take another journey into F6 System Config. And so I'm going to press F6 System Config. And we can see the bottom half of this configuration, the parameters, have to do with connecting the Portable up to other peripherals. We could connect it up to a plotter, but that's beyond the scope of this tape. And we could connect it up to a printer. And we see that the default printer interface is HPIL. If we press Next Choice, F3 Next Choice, oops, we're up at the top here. I pressed Next Choice and didn't do us much good because we just changed the main memory eDisk. Let's move down, the cursor down. And now the cursor is at Printer Interface, and it's HPIL. We'll press Next Choice. And now we are configured to print to a serial printer. We press next choice again. We get yet another option. So let's go back to the previous choice, which is F4. And we're back to HPIL, which is what we want to be in the first place. While we're here, let's look at some of these other parameters. Printer mode is tells us what kind of screen dump, we call screen dump, to the HP ThinkJet. Right now, we're configured so that text, or alpha, and this says HP graphics will get printed to the ThinkJet if we press Shift Print. In fact, it's just alphabetical characters that normally get printed. I don't know if you remember, but back at the beginning of the tape, we did a Shift Print when we were talking about keys, and we found that the PAM screen, the words in the PAM screen, but not the black boxes, got printed out. So we're going to change this right now from alpha and HP graphics. We're going to change it to just HP graphics only, and we'll have an interesting result that we'll see in a minute. Remember that none of these configurations take effect until we actually get back out of system config and into PAM. Printer pitch and line spacing and skip perforation stand for different characteristics of the printer that we may decide to configure. So let's move the cursor down and see some choices. F3 is what's called normal. We can print in expanded mode. We can print in compressed mode. We can print in expanded compressed mode, or we can have no configuration. In terms of line spacing, we could print 6 lines per inch or 8 lines per inch. And in skip perforation means that when you're printing, say, a memo maker document, it'll know about that crease in the paper between that's perforated piece that's between pages, and will actually skip a few lines. So depending on what your needs, you'll probably want to experiment around with these different configuration options. Finally, the Datacom interface tells us that we're using an internal modem. So let's press F8 and exit. We're going to go back to PAM, and the printer ejects a page just to tell us that we're connected. And what we're going to do is we're going to do the Shift Print, and what's going to happen is a very nice image of the PAM screen is going to go to the ThinkJet printer. So Shift Print, and immediately the printer starts printing the page, and a reduced but very accurate printed page will come out from this screen dump. So now on the ThinkJet printer, so that we can see it more easily, I'm going to press the LF or line feed button, and it's going to move up a line. And hopefully the camera is focusing in on the ThinkJet output, and we see a nice output from the Portable Plus to the ThinkJet.